Good morning, guys. I'm going to go ahead and start today with Winn Dixie. Um, Gosh, I can't even remember where we left off. I think we went to chapter 5. Well, I'm going to start off on chapter 6 today. Chapter 6. All right, so Winn Dixie. So we've got little Naomi, or I'm sorry, little Opal and her dog Winn Dixie. And let's pick it up from chapter 6. I spent a lot of time that summer at the Herman W. Block Memorial Library. The Herman W. Block Memorial Library sounds like it would be a big, fancy place, but it's not. It's just an old house full of books, and Miss Fanny Block is in charge of them. She is very small. She's a very old, short, gray-haired woman, and she was the first friend that I made in my new town of Naomi. It all started with Winn Dixie not liking it when I was in the library because he couldn't come inside too. But I showed him how that he could stand up on his hind legs and he could look in the window and see me when I was in there. Selected my books, and he was okay as long as he could see me. But the thing was, the first time that Miss Fanny Block saw Winn Dixie stand up on his hind legs like that, staring in the window, she didn't think that he was a dog. She thought he was a bear. Now, this is what happened. I was picking out my books and I was kind of humming to myself, and all of a sudden there was a loud and a scary scream. And I went running up to the front of the library, and there was Miss Fanny Block sitting on the floor behind her desk. "Miss Franny," I said, "are you all right?" "There's a bear! A bear!" "A bear?" I asked. "He's come back," she said. "He has?" I asked. "Where is he?" "Out there." She raised a finger and then she pointed at Winn Dixie, who was standing up on its hind legs looking in the window at me. "Miss Franny Block," I said, "that is not a bear. That is my dog. That is my dog, Winn Dixie." "Are you positive?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I told her. "I'm positive. He is my dog. I would know him anywhere." Now, Miss Franny sat there trembling and shaking. "Come on," I said. "Let me help you up. It's okay." I stuck my hand out for Miss Franny, and then she took hold of it, and I pulled her up off the floor. She didn't weigh hardly anything at all, and once she was standing on her feet, she started acting all embarrassed, saying how I must think that she is a really silly old lady mistaking a dog for a bear, but that she had had a bad experience with the bear coming into the library a long time ago, and she had never quite gotten over it. "What? When did that happen?" I asked her. "Well," said Miss Franny, "it was a very long story." "That's okay," I told her. I am like my mama in that I love being told stories. But before you start telling me, can Winn Dixie come in and listen too? He gets really lonely without me." "Well, I don't know," said Miss Franny. "Dogs aren't allowed in the Herman W. Block Memorial Library." "He will be good," I told her. "He's a dog who goes to church." And before she could say yes or no, I went outside and I got Winn Dixie, and then he came back in and he laid with me. "Oof," he said with a sigh, right at Miss Franny's feet. She looked down at him and she said, "He most certainly is a very large dog." "Yes, ma'am," I told her, "and he has a large heart too." "Well," Miss Franny said. She bent over and she gave Winn Dixie a pat on the head, and Winn Dixie wagged his back tail back and forth, and then he stuffed his nose by the little old lady's feet. "Let me get you a chair and sit down so that I can tell you this properly." Chapter 7. Now, Chapter 7 tells us a story about the bear being in the library, which seems kind of odd. Now, back when Florida was wild, when it was considered to be nothing but palmetto trees and mosquitoes, so big that they could fly away with you, Miss Franny started in, and I was just a little girl. I was no bigger than you, and my father, Herman W. Block, told me that I could have anything that I wanted for my birthday, anything at all. Miss Franny looked around the library, and she leaned in close to me. "Now, I didn't want to appear prideful," she said, "but my daddy was a very rich man. He was very rich." And she nodded, and then she leaned. And then she leaned back and said, "And I was a little girl who loved to read." So I told my daddy. I said, "Daddy, I most certainly would love to have a library for my birthday. A small little library would be wonderful." "You asked for a whole library?" "Well, a small one," Miss Franny nodded. "I wanted a little house full of books. Nothing but books that I wanted to share them, and I wanted to share them. And I got my wish." My father built me this house, the very one that we're sitting in right now. And at a very young age, I became a librarian. Yes, ma'am. Well, what about the bear? I said. Did I mention that Florida was wild back in those days? Miss Franny Block said. You did. Well, it was wild. Now, there were wild men, there were wild women, and there were wild animals, like bears. Yes, ma'am, that's right. Now, I have to tell you, I was a little Miss Know-It-All, and I was a little Miss Smarty Pants, and I had a library full of books. Oh, yes, ma'am, I thought I knew the answer to everything. Well, one hot Thursday, I was sitting in my library with all the doors and the windows open, and my nose was stuck in a book when a shadow crossed the desk. And without looking up, yes, ma'am, without even looking up, I said, "Is there a book that I can help you find?" Well, there was no answer. And so I thought it might have been a wild man or a wild woman scared about these books and afraid to speak up. But then I became aware of a very particular smell, a very strong smell, and I raised my eyes slowly, and standing right there in front of me was a bear. Yes, ma'am, a very large bear. How big? I asked. Oh, well, said Miss Franny, perhaps 3 times the size of your dog. And then what happened? I asked. Well, said Miss Franny, I looked at him, and he looked at me. And he put his big nose up in the air, and then he sniffed and sniffed and sniffed, like he was trying to decide if a little Miss Know-It-All librarian would be, is what he was in the mood for eating. And I just sat there, and then I thought, well, if this bear intends to eat me, then I am not going to go down without a fight. No, ma'am. So very slowly and very carefully, I raised up the book that I was reading. What book was that? I asked. It was a book called War and Peace. It was a very large book. And I raised it up slowly, and then I aimed it carefully, and I threw it right there at that bear. And then I screamed, "Be gone!" And do you know what? No, ma'am, what? Well, he went. But this is what I will never forget. He took the book with him. "Nuh-uh," I said. "Yes, ma'am," said Miss Franny. "He snatched it up and then he ran." Did he ever come back? I asked. Nope, I never saw him again. Well, the men in town used to tease me all about it, and they used to say, "Miss Franny, we saw that bear of yours in the woods today. He was reading that book, and he said it was sure good, and he would be right, and would it be all right if he could just keep it for another week?" Yes, ma'am, they did tease me all about that, I sighed. She sighed. I imagine I'm the only one left I'm the only one left from these days, and I imagine that I'm the only one who recalls the bear. All of my friends, everybody I knew when I was young, they're all dead and gone. She sighed again, and then she looked sad. She looked sad, and she looked old and wrinkled. It was the same way that I felt sometimes being friendless in a new town and not having a mama to comfort me. And I sighed too. Winn Dixie raised his head off his paws, and he looked back and forth between me and Miss Franny. He sat up, and then he showed Miss Franny his teeth. "Well, now, look at that," she said. "That dog is smiling at me." "It's a talent of his," I said. "It is a fine talent," Miss Franny said. "A very fine talent." And she smiled back at Winn Dixie. "We could be friends," I said to Miss Franny. "I mean, you and me and Winn Dixie. We could all be friends." Miss Franny smiled even bigger. "Why, that would be grand," she said. "Just grand." And right that moment, we had decided to be friends. And who should come marching into the Herman W. Block Memorial Library but old pinch-face Amanda Wilkerson. She walked right up to Miss Franny's desk, and she said, "I just finished Johnny Tremaine, and I enjoyed it very much, and I would like something even more difficult now to read because I am an advanced reader." "Yes, dear, I know," said Miss Franny, and she got up out of her chair, and Amanda pretended like I wasn't even there. She stared right past me. "Are dogs allowed in the library?" she asked Miss Franny as she walked away. "Certain ones are," said Miss Franny, "a select few." And then she turned around and she winked at me, and I smiled back. I had just made my very first friend in Naomi, and nobody was going to mess it up for me, not even old pinch-face Amanda Wilkerson. Chapter 8. All right, I'm going to stop there today, and tomorrow I will pick up on Chapter 8. I hope you enjoyed Winn Dixie, and next I will read the robot. See ya!